Awesome. Thanks, Niall. So if we go on to the next slide there, what is Comandante? So we're going to take you through kind of what is Comandante. We're going to show you this near real-time workflow, which aims to kind of solve a really core virtual production problem, which is if you can't do in-camera visual effects and you can't get what you want in camera there and then, how can you fix it easily in comp? How can you collect enough data to pass it easily into comp or into post? We're going to run through some of the tools that we've developed as part of this workflow, and including things like plugins for Unreal, plugins that connect the real-time world to Nuke, as well as then Mairéad's going to take us through Copycat and how it can be used for in-camera visual effects. And then we're going to go down to the very exciting and terrifying example take. Niall, are you sweating yet? Good. So, Comandante, what is it? Well, essentially, Comandante is it's a feature film that's set in around World War II era. It follows the story of a World War II naval commander, hence the name Comandante, where he had to sink an enemy ship. It wasn't like a battleship, so the law of kind of war said that he had to sink the ship, but the law of man said that he had to save the survivors, and that's the story he wants to tell. So it's a very emotional story, but it's set on sea, and it's set in sort of quite a violent sea setting. So there's a lot of like kind of production challenge that go along with this, but to let you kind of see some of the things that you're going to see, or to give you a sneak peek of some of the things that we're going to see and talk about during this session today, we're going to show you a little bit of a sizzle reel. So that's kind of roughly the intro to kind of what like Comandante looks like, and hopefully that looked interesting, and and you're going to hang around and learn exactly like what happened to make all that stuff and what's going to go on there. But first of all, I'm going to hand you over to Peter, who's going to talk about the like how he was involved into the production and some of the production challenges and why this production was so tough to spec from a virtual production perspective. So, Peter, how were you brought into this project, and then like what were your first thoughts when you started hearing what was necessary?
Well, thanks, Dan. My introduction to this project was with the visual effects supervisor, Kevin Todd Haig, who we had worked with on a couple of projects before, and this is some of our current portfolio of work. Would be sort of Night Flyers Foundation, Modern Love. We've also just been delivered, which has gone into post, Anansi Boys for Amazon Prime, and Retribution, which is a Liam Neeson feature, which is just in the late stages of post-production. So we're sort of a small boutique virtual production company, and Kevin approached us about a challenge that he had for this project Comandante coming up. So obviously, on the next slide that I'll show you here, we had done some work with Kevin before. This is going back right to 2016, 2017. And what we wanted to do was to look at a way of keeping, for example, reflections and in-camera lighting or interactive lighting in a workflow for Comandante, because the challenges that Comandante has is that obviously it's on the sea, there's an awful lot of water, and traditional sort of LED volume work is not going to work in this scenario. So Kevin, looking at this, just what this is, it really is just a snapshot of an example of what we're trying to preserve. That's an LED screen in the background, black onyx running on Brompton, but in the foreground and the ground is just polished tiles. So it gives you an idea of the sort of reflections that you can achieve. So there's nothing, that's just a simple reflection. The second video, which I'm just going to show now, is what we just did for, this is a test we did for Modern Love. And this, even though this was in camera, what I just draw your attention to is what's happening on the seats. So again, this is the lighting perspective. So if you look at the seats of this train, this was photoreal, it was done with plates, but the way the shadows and the lighting is interacting in the carriage is what we're trying to preserve, knowing that the background with the workflow with Foundry is going to be replaced. And the reason it's going to be replaced is in the next slide, when you look at the sort of challenges that we have for Comandante, which is massive water tanks, dumping water, reflections that we want to preserve. A traditional high-res 2mm LED screen in a water tank is just not going to work. It's going to get wet. It's not IP rated. So we also then went down the challenge of saying, well, do we go with an outdoor LED screen? Do we go with 5mm or something that's rated at 5,000 nits that gives us loads of interactive light? Again, knowing that the background that is going to get wet, it could get damaged. And that's when we introduced a sort of a discussion with Foundry about what else can we possibly do. So the challenge here is that we think that an LED screen is not really going to work in this scenario, but new systems like what we're seeing now with interactive light, even with this sort of matrix style lighting, as in Venetian blinds using lighting tools as a way of capturing the video. What we're trying to find is a workflow that will synchronize the exact I suppose in-screen graphics that are going to be happening, or the backgrounds that are going to be happening, sampling those with lighting, and then working with the DP to actually generate the interactive lighting and the plates. So it's synchronizing the two things together. The workflow that we've arrived at, I think, is really, really good, because it's also, the DP is really encouraged about it, because also it's working in a scenario that he understands. It's not a huge change. If he wants to put tungsten lights in the background, which is one of the things he wants to do, we can do that. If he wants to use huge amounts of sort of low-res, ultra-low-res LED screen, we can do that as well, because we're not worried about what actually is going to be in the back of the frame. Traditionally, on a lot of those other projects that I mentioned as well, there's a discussion, I know it was on some of the sessions earlier on, but about metadata. Every single project that we do, the first question going into it is, what are you doing about metadata? And this is a dead end for metadata. And how does this go through to post? We've had scenarios on some productions where, for example, there's been a script change in post. And what's happened is that what's been shot in camera is now not relevant. It's not that it didn't work, it's just script-wise it didn't work, so it's changed. So now we're rotoscoping out all that LED work to replace the backgrounds. This workflow, which Foundry have come up with, and we're really, really excited to be part of, is preserving all of that. So it's offering a confidence to the process, which is certainly, as somebody who's running a very small virtual production company, we have a lot of producers that are completely petrified of this process. They're really nervous about it. They want to do it, but they're convinced that if it goes wrong, it's going to cost an awful lot of money. I had one line producer say to me just before we were about to go on a shoot, literally set up to go on the very first take, and she turned around and she said, "This better work, Peter, because you've taken all the contingency out of the post-production budget." Now, she said it tongue-in-cheek, and we hadn't taken all the contingency out of the post-production budget, but what it did do was demonstrate the sort of nervousness that people have. So I think the whole metadata pipeline that's happening here now is really, really encouraging, and also just offers that confidence to the whole process. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Dan now, really.
I had a follow-up question, though. So Kevin Todd Haig is obviously the person who roped you into this, and then
brought you
roped us in. Kevin is very clever, and when he was looking at these things, he was breaking down problems, and he never saw anything as sort of impossible, just slightly challenging. There's always like upbeat manner and like really fantastic. I mean, how when you met Kevin and he started talking to you about all these challenges, did you think that this is the new way of work? This is how do you come in contact with Kevins of the world often? Or
and I think, look, the great thing about Kevin is that it's blue sky thinking from the beginning. It's not stifling the creative. This is what we want to deliver, and this is what we want. At the end of the day, we've got a submarine on water. There's going to be actors on the submarine. We need to create this as realistically as possible. When you start working down through the pipeline of the challenges that happen, I think this is a really good example of how the creative process has suddenly arrived with a technical result. So I suppose with everything, you want to make sure that the creative is always the priority. You're not using the technology for the sake of using the technology. So this is actually a good example, because we've gone from a massive LED screen of 2mm, which possibly had some sort of structures around it to try and preserve it so it didn't get damaged and things like that, all the way down now through low-res LED screen to now low-res replacement, live replacement. So that process is where we've arrived at now. But it's always kept the creative as the priority.
Exactly. That theme has been brilliant, and I think Kevin did a great job of keeping the creative and technical in line the whole time. But you mentioned about challenges. So Dan, do you want to take us through some of the challenges and some of the scary moments of at the beginning of is this even possible?
Yeah. So where to begin? Well, we had this previous sequence that was delivered to us, and it was already there was things springing to mind. So essentially what we're looking at here is a huge big battle sequence. As we were talking about, we were working, it's all taking place on the back of this submarine in the Atlantic Ocean, and We've got all kinds of things to contend with here in terms of like tight framings, like fast camera moves, and realistically to have all of this interaction with the water, we're going to need to go kind of practical and visual to pull all of this off and have it feel believable. So if you go over to the next slide, we had then this tech viz that was presented to us, and that was the first thing to call out here is we're in this massive wave water tank. So production wanted to work as practically as possible, and we were trying to come up with a way that could happen. We had all kinds of crazy conversations about 100-foot submarines and motion control rigs and motion capture systems that could survive spray, water, like all those sorts of things. But the primary reason, and this is what Peter was talking about as well, is we wanted all the lighting and reflections. So for that reason, we kind of ruled out green screen, blue screen as an option for us. And then we had to get to work with figuring out a way to kind of bring all of this together.
I think on this particular tech viz, it was interesting. I think, Peter, you looked into like specking out how much LED would be needed for this. And I think at one point, did you because this was a big submarine in a big tank. And
yeah, I mean, we were looking at it when we saw it initially, we were going, yeah, this is very challenging. Just from a scale point of view, but also looking at where the water is and how that relates to a screen. And when you start looking at all of the real physical logistics of working in a water tank or having a screen of that scale in a water tank, it was, we worked through it because obviously you want to work down through it and see, is there a way of doing it? And there is. They actually have come up with a couple of ways that this could be done, but it's huge engineering, which was probably slightly out of the scope of what the production was actually able to do. So again, we work down through the process then. Also, the other huge thing with, it's probably worth saying, is when you go to a lower res screen, for example, that is an outdoor rated screen, all of these water tanks have chlorine in them. So, there was even a discussion then saying, well, actually, do we try and use end of life screen? Have we got companies around that, have screens that maybe have pixels missing or that they're going to dump and try and do that? So that's what was great about the process, I think, is that almost every scenario was explored. And that's how we've got to where we are now.
Brilliant. Dan, so when we started looking at these walls, some really very practical constraints came up, and you touched on a couple of them, but what are these core ones? Take us through them.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, the green screen, blue screen thing wasn't going to work. We wanted all the interactive light, we wanted the reflections, and realistically, as Peter mentioned, we can't really use the fine pixel pitches. So in-camera visual effects, you want to capture as much in-camera as possible. We can do that for the lighting and reflections, but we can't really do that for the images that we're capturing because we're using such a wide pixel pitch. So essentially, we just needed a way to help the on-set team visualize what they were seeing and have confidence that they were capturing the right thing when they were working on set. And in this case, I think the director was actually working with this technology for the very first time. So it was important to him to have creative control, but also have the confidence in this process that he was getting everything he needed, because the budget really didn't give any flexibility for reshooting or any of those sorts of things. So. We basically needed a workflow, a technique to kind of bring all this together, and that's what we've been referring to as near real time.
So this is what we're calling the near real-time workflow. This is to try and address those production constraints. And there's three goals of near real-time. And the first and foremost is empowering filmmakers. So it's very clear that from the very beginning that the filmmakers of this hadn't worked with virtual production before, but we're very excited about it. But as going back to what Peter said about confidence and nervousness of production, we wanted to make sure that everything we did here was inspiring confidence. And this meant that we needed to come up with a way that we could show the directors and DP exactly what they've shot, but a better version of it, so that they could make a decision on whether they got what they needed and whether they could move on. This is incredibly important and something that we definitely hadn't considered before. The second thing then is being able to deliver on the in-camera visual effects promise of taking home your material that day, so the same day take home. So even if you didn't get what you wanted in camera there and then, being able to process that on set as in a handful of minutes, or even just that same day, and being able to hand that over to whoever needs it later on, or have it ready for dailies the next day. And then finally beginning post-production for the moment the director says cut. So metadata was a key theme that's already come up in here. I think this is one of the bingo buzzwords of the conference so far, is metadata. And the idea here is like if you're clever about your metadata and you capture everything properly and you deliver it in a sensible way onto post-production, whether that's post-production on set or off-set, you get huge time savings, huge cost savings, and you basically have you're making the most of all of this valuable camera data, lens metadata, as well as initial composites and decisions that are captured on set, including like ones from LED processors. So this is all really, really important. So, Dan, what are we looking at here? So I think I've mentioned the kind of the goals of near real-time workflow, but how do we stitch it all together? How do we actually make it work? What are the components?
Yeah, so buzzword, metadata, that was the first part of the process. So everything on set is generating really valuable information and all of the kind of creative changes that we're working with. So the first step is to use our tool that we've been calling VP Assist, and hopefully we can demo this later, to capture and record all of that, to package it up and eventually deliver it to post-production. The second part of this process is to re-render the background for a background replacement using our tool Unreal Reader. And that's obviously because we're working with the coarse pixel pitch, we need something higher resolution to give them the information and knowledge that they've captured the right thing on set. The third thing is we're working with, in this case, we're working with Cook on their iTechnology lenses to capture all of that metadata and provide a way of working with distortion correctly. And then the final part of this process, but an essential step, is to use on-set machine learning segmentation to effectively extract our actor and replace the background while keeping all of the active lighting. And that's the tool that we've been calling Copycat. And all of these components, when put together, come into essentially a post-viz script composite, which can be iterated on set and also delivered into post as a first pass kind of creative step.
Nice one. So those are the components. What does it actually look like in practice then, if you're on set?
So the very first thing that we're doing is we're capturing everything. We're working kind of across Unreal Engine and Nuke. So we do a take and record everything coming out of the camera, all of the SDI feeds, all of the time code. That's kind of essential for both parts of this process in terms of connecting the kind of two worlds together. And then we do our higher resolution renders kind of out of Unreal. So as I mentioned, machine learning segmentation, that's the very first kind of step. So we're shooting on coarse pixel pitch. We need to extract our actor. So we go through a kind of copycat process to extract that. Once we've shot and we have our SDI feed and we have our high resolution renders, we then need to kind of combine those together to give us our kind of end slap comp, essentially.
Nice. So now we've introduced the components and the process, we're going to start diving deeper into these core technologies, and there's three that we're going to cover today. The first is VP Assist, which is our plugin for Unreal. I'm going to hand you over to Niall to... Thanks, Dan. I'm going to hand you over to Niall, who's going to walk you through what VP Assist does and why it's so important.
Cool. So we've already heard kind of the importance of metadata, and we want to capture it all to be able to render back after the fact. And to do that, we're going to use tools in Unreal that already exist, namely the take recorder and the sequencer, which maybe you've heard of, which are really great, really powerful tools, allow us to do a lot of what we want to do. But when we first started using them, we realized there's a lot to it. There's a lot of options, there's a lot of boxes to be ticked, there's a lot of setup, there's a lot that can go wrong. And in this workflow, we really want to be as reliable as possible, and it's really important to us. So we tried to simplify some of these problems, and we did this through our plugin, VP Assist. Now, this isn't available freely yet, it's still internal, but maybe stay tuned on that one. So what does it actually do? So most of it is about the take recorder, about simplifying that process of the take recorder. We want to have a camera, so you're able to select your camera from available cameras in the scene, as well as a base sequence you might want to play back. And really, apart from that, then it's just kind of frame rate and a few other minor options with tape recording. So we try and keep it as simple as possible. And that'll persist take to take, so you don't have to change things or check things in between your takes. And it also does a few other jobs. So there is an option for syncing between end display. So if you're playing back a base sequence on this machine, which I'm going to do the actual take record on, as well as the end display machines, this tool will sync the kind of that sequence you want to play back, so it's playing back at exactly the right time, and what we're recording is the right thing. It's what was playing on the wall. It also does some kind of additional things with creating a chroma key comp, just so a simple composure comp. This is mostly for a green screen workflow, but it was something that was useful to us on a previous project. Again, composure is awesome, but it does take a little bit of work to actually create your composure comp. So this is, we just kind of made it a tick box, and it'll use your camera, it'll use whatever input you want. And similarly, then we have an SDI out option, which allows you to output something from Unreal, whether it be your comp or whether it be the actual camera that you're using in Unreal, like your inner frustum camera in N-Display, so you can output that to monitors for your directors to see. And the last thing it does then, it actually connects to Nuke. So Nuke has a tool to actually record the SDI feed. So I have an SDI feed coming into my laptop here. And in our SDI reader node in Nuke, we can record all that SDI footage, so we're able to do our near real-time comp. And then that node can actually link to VP Assist and then trigger that take record at the same time. And then those two kind of read nodes that we get, because they both write to EXORs, are linked, and we have all that data.
So one thing to call out here is going back to Jim Hellman's previous talk on like capturing and storing metadata and delivering the metadata. VP Assist tool is a practical implementation of how you capture that metadata and bring it to that source of truth. So I think this, as well as sort of simplifying the take record, as Niall said, this is the this is the save your bacon tool, where if nothing else works on set, this is the one that makes sure that you have something that you can bring it, deliver it into post, and it's in Unreal, which post houses are already using.
Exactly. Cool. And then the next kind of piece of the puzzle is Unreal Reader. So we have our sequence in Unreal. As Dan said, that's our source of truth. That's saved forever. It's fantastic to have. But we want to be able to get that into Nuke really quickly and easily. And Unreal Reader will let us do that. So Unreal Reader is a plugin that we released, a plugin on the Unreal side, a node on the Nuke side that we released in Nuke 13.1, which allows you to get renders, camera data, metadata from Unreal into Nuke really quickly. So it can do a number of jobs. So first and most important is images. So you can get your RGBA render out really fast, but you can also get a number of AOVs. And we've made that as simple and easy to use as possible. So anything from world position to depth to cryptomatte and lots of other stuff can be used, and you can instantly get that into Nuke. You can also get camera data, so you can translate your camera from your Unreal sequence into a Nuke camera. And if you even want to tweak the render from your sequence, you can put a camera as input into your Unreal Reader node, and that'll non-destructively change that render. You can also split things out into layers, so you can get an individual object, remove any occlusion, and get access to pixels that aren't in the final beauty pass. And there's lots of different ways you can use this data. You can use position to points to kind of get that world position and make a point cloud in Nuke, and you can do lots of cool stuff. But in terms of how we use it for near real time, is really we want to just immediately after our take get that RGBA pass here, this is our Unreal Reader render, directly into Nuke.
And is that would that be the same image that's going up into the wall, or would that be slightly different?
No, so we can. That's the beauty of it. We can up the quality of our render immediately. So when we're working with N-Display, we have to make sure we're running at rate. We have to probably make sacrifices on post-processing, other Unreal features. But after the fact, we don't have those constraints. We can up our render times. We can have warm-up frames. We can turn on all the bells and whistles and get as much as you want. And that's the beauty of it. Nice.
So the next technical component then is lensing. So again, in the previous talk, we were talking a lot about like lens metadata. That came up a lot, and there's some. And as mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about like the really intelligent, clever stuff that's going on in Cook. So when we were brought into the project, then then we were very quickly introduced to Mr. David Stump here. So this is Mr. Metadata, and I think his name has appeared on a couple of the previous presentations here, which was great. What was interesting with this is we knew that when we needed to kind of marry the real and virtual, you need to understand what your lens is doing to either like distort your renders to match your physical lens, or undistort your live action thing to match the render. Now, we knew that the filmmakers, the DP, were going to be shooting with really exotic Cooke lenses, really like lovely anamorphic lenses, and which have a lot of character. But character means often hard to work with. Often means like extra lots of distortion, and like the distortion is the character, and you want to keep that. But it's hard to model and it's hard to work with. So then David Stump introduced us to the folks at Cooke, who have this fantastic new process of calibrating the lens in factory and then embedding that metadata inside the lens itself. So now let's hear a little from David Stump.
I'm a director of photography and a visual effects supervisor. Metadata is very important in modern workflows for cinema. The metadata that is available from modern lenses gives you an advantage in time, it saves you money, it saves you a lot of trouble in reverse engineering the optics of any given scene for visual effects work. Cooke have instituted a program of empirically measuring every lens that they manufacture on a special machine that pixel accurately quantifies every ray in the lens. When you have good, accurate lens metadata, when you have lens maps, when you have JSON files that will give you the distortion parameters of a lens and the shading parameters of a lens, you have got a head start on finishing your visual effects, a big head start.
Thank you, David. So this was like music to our ears, because we knew that we didn't want to have to go shoot lens grids for these sorts of things, and we then like went about like testing, like how good are these lens maps, and this is a result of our test. And this was a really like eye-opening eureka moment for us. And this is where there you can see the Cooke 40mm super flare anamorphic lens, and it weighs a ton and it has fantastic properties. We then shot this grid on a flat LED wall to use as a checkerboard to kind of undistort within Nuke. Now, here's my best attempt in Nuke's lens and distortion tool. And what I'm going to point out here is like when we look, it looks okay here, but if you look at the aspect ratio of the checkers, they kind of squeeze towards the side of the image. Now this might be okay for some things, but it's probably not. It's not great. And this is the best I could get. This took me a long time to even get this. And this is the result of the Cooke undistortion. You can see here the checkers are uniform across the entire image, and this is really, really impressive. This was like, okay, this is the way we do things from now on. So you can see here the kind of an A/B between the two, and you can see the kind of checkers kind of squeezing and undistorting. And what you really want is that uniformity. And now, like, it also highlights how, like, kind of, I should, like, if you remembered back to the original image there, it's there is some really nice kind of squeezing that happens towards the edges of anamorphic lenses, and this is what gives them their character. And it's why the edge of the image is so important to capture and get right. So yes, this was a beautiful moment for us. So that's the lensing. And the next thing then is obviously we tie this in. We were pulling this this metadata off the lens itself, going through, I think it was like the Waro Easy Track box, Waro's amazing system for doing this, and also capturing on the ambient locket box. So we had multiple ways of capturing this metadata, and we experimented with how best to kind of bring it through the system and then get it into Nuke. But once we had a kind of a way of doing that, it was very easy to work with. And there's more details kind of on some of the online videos and Cooke like GitHub pages and Bitbucket pages on what that lens metadata formats look like, in case you're interested. Now onto the final technical component, which is copycat. So machine learning, not just for visual effects, but in-camera visual effects. Mairéad, tell us more.
Thanks, Dan. I think the guys had mentioned how important it is to get a previs for directors to be able to take a look at what they're capturing in camera, but also to be able to impose in the high resolution footage in the background, so you get a real idea of what the final shot is going to look like. And that's when we turn to machine learning and copycat to kind of try and do that. So I guess the first question is, what is copycat and how does that work? So if we skip on to the next slide there, Niall. Basically, the whole idea behind copycat is that we're trying to train a neural network to do something specific to an artist's shot or a series of shots that an artist is working on. So previously what an artist would have had to do if they wanted to create a matte of a person is that they would have to use roto to matte the person in every frame from that sequence. And what we wanted to do with Copycat is we wanted to give artists the ability to reduce the amount of manual effort they had to use to create something like a matte. So using Copycat, we wanted to give them the ability to maybe reduce the number of frames they had to edit. What if instead of editing all of the frames, they only had to edit a small subset of those frames? So in Copycat, what we do is, say we were to take this video of this girl running on the left-hand side here, and we wanted to create a matte of the person running so we could segment her from the background. Again, typically what you would have to do as an artist is you would have to roto this girl for every frame. But with Copycat, the idea we had was, what if the artist only had to take a handful of frames, 7 or 8 frames, and they created a roto mask for those 7 or 8 frames? And then they handed in the input sequence or the input frames of the girl running and those ground truth masks that they had just created. And they passed them into a neural network then inside Nuke called Copycat that trains on this data. And when the model has trained, it will be able to generate a mask for the entire sequence. Basically, we have this pre-train or this trained tool now that will give you a mask of the person and will segment her from the background from the entire sequence. And if we flip on to the next one, I think we have a result video where we can see. So on the left-hand side, we had the input of the girl running, and she's supposed to be running. And in the middle, we have the mask then that you get from Copycat. And again, it's a sequence, so that mask is being generated for each of the frames in that sequence. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that we're using that mask to segment the person or the girl running from the background. And that's where we're starting to see how important this could be in something like Comandante. And again, Copycat isn't just for matting and masking. There's a whole range of different applications that Copycat is really useful for. So if we flip on to the next slide, we'll just show you a little trailer of some of the other applications that Copycat can be used for. So I guess the next question is, how do we take something like Copycat and bring it into this near real-time workflow? How do we actually get this to work on footage that we're grabbing from Comandante? Well, the first step is you have to, well, I guess, again, what we're doing is we're going to try and remove the live actor in the foreground from that LED wall in the background. What we want to do is we want to gather a data set that we can use to train Copycat so that it will do that. So it will learn what the actor looks like, what the background looks like, and how to separate those two things. So the first thing we have to do is we have to capture a green screen from the LED wall. So it's the first step. So you shoot a locked off green screen clean plate. The second step then is to shoot a number of rehearsal takes of your actor in front of that green screen. And what you want your actor to do is you want them to do some of the moves and actions that they're going to actually be doing in the real shoot when they're in front of the real, lit LED wall behind them. So once you've got these rehearsal takes done, what you can then do is you can use that clean plate that you shot the first time round and use it to remove the green screen from behind the actor. So then you just get a nice mask of the actor with nothing in the background. And then the third step is that you want to shoot the LED wall and all of the things that are going to be on the LED wall. But you also want to include things that are going to be in camera that might not necessarily be the LED wall. So the floor, the scene around, you know, you might be, when you're capturing on set, you're also going to capture the floor. You're also going to capture the edge of the LED wall and the walls behind it. So you want to take your camera and shoot some footage around the LED wall and the area surrounding it. And then once you've got that, you're going to comp your actor onto this footage that you've captured off the LED wall and the areas around it. And that's what you're going to use as your data set to train Copycat. Because when you do this, you have the actor being pasted onto all of these different backgrounds, but you also have the matte of that actor. So you have a ground truth where you can remove them from that background. And that's the data set that you're going to use to train Copycat. And once you've trained Copycat, you then have a model that you can use on set that will remove your actor from the real background when you're shooting them on the LED wall, the real LED wall, and with the in-camera footage. So that's the pipeline that we're using within Comandante to get the actor removed from the background. So you get this really nice previs. So I think this is the actor in front of the LED wall, and this is the one we want to remove. I think this is the low-res version, and this is the one we want to replace with the high-res. So we want to give the actor an idea of what the high-res version of the ocean will look like. So the first step then is to take the actor, put him in front of the green screen, take some footage of the actor in front of it again, making sure he's in the right clothes and doing some of the right actions. Here we have him using a prop, using a gun, which is really nice because Copycat is nice. It can actually segment that gun. So you bring it into Nuke and then you, again, get that really nice matte of the actor and put him on the footage that you've shot off the LED wall and the floor and the studio you'll see here. And again, this is the data set you're going to use to train Copycat. So you kick the training off and it will run for, you know, a certain amount of time. And you can see it running here. This is it running inside Nuke and the kind of feedback you get when it's training. And then once it's trained, I think it can take a bit of time, but you can see the loss function decreasing and stuff. Once it's trained, this is the kind of match you get of your actor. And again, I mean, it might not be perfect, but this is exactly what you need to get a good previs, and this is all a director needs to be able to tell whether the actor's looking in the right place, whether, you know, everything's running as it should. And again, this is all being done inside Nuke, so it's a really nice system where you can get your footage, matte it, look at it, see if it looks good. If it doesn't look good, you can add a bit more data, retrain again, or, you know, resume training. So it's all, you know, a feedback loop, which is really great for this kind of previs.
Nice. So that's the on-set training workflow. Making data sets, but making data sets on set is risky. What can we do? Is there another way we can map the actor?
So there's an awful lot of models becoming available online now that do human matting. So I think we have one available now called ModNet. It was proposed like a year or two ago. And actually within Nuke 14 now in September, October, we're going to be releasing a whole host of these different pre-trained tools that you can use within Nuke to do a wide range of different applications using machine learning. And one of the ones that we'll be making available in what we're calling the category is a human matting model. And say you just had an actor and you wanted to replace them or remove them from the background, you could use something like this ModNet model to do just that. And that doesn't have to be trained at all. That's ready to use, plug and play. So you'll be able to get instant matting results without having to do any training. But again, what's nice about Copycat is, remember we saw that actor using that gun? That wouldn't necessarily be matted if you were using a pre-trained tool that you get available on the internet. So they will just do human matting. But if you want to do something like Copycat or use Copycat to do something like segmenting, you know, different props, that's when Copycat can be really useful. So we have these two things available, which is really nice.
Nice one. Thank you. So now it's the danger zone. Niall, you ready? I think just because I'm conscious of time, I wonder if it's worth if we skip over. So you know the video with Guillaume on it, just to highlight. So like in case we don't get this demo working and we run out of time, I do want to show this an example of what all this looks like when you stitch it all together. So this is a really nice example that production were really happy with, and they immediately were like, yes, this works for us. So here you can see this is an example of the post-viz when it's combining. Oh dear, battery low. Oh dear. So this. We were everybody was very happy with this, and so the director likes to shoot lots of like handheld, the kind of long shots, which don't really suit in-camera visual effects. And this is the producer, Pier Paolo Verga, And he wanted to play with the camera, so he picked up the camera and he wanted to shoot the way he wanted to shoot, and he wanted to capture all these and test the limits of it. And of course, he points it the entirely off wall, which is very hard for in-camera visual effects, but it captures all the nice dynamic, rich lighting. And you can see there that the copycat training was able to get a nice matte of the actor here, but completely off the wall. And even looking back at the crew and then stage here, and then we were able to comp this live or near live, and get a better version of what was shot. So that's the top is what was shot on set, and the bottom is the higher quality re-rendered, composited with all extra kind of depth effects with flares, with better kind of tweaks lighting, tweaks to color and everything, and see the whole thing kind of fits a bit better. And this is exactly what the producer and the director want to see in order to kind of know whether they got the shot that they wanted or not. So this was the moment where we were like, yes, this is possible, and this is sort of the denouement. Now, Niall,
Yeah.
you ready?
Let's do it, yeah.
Let's do it. Okay. Do we have a volunteer from the audience who wants to star in this production? Am I going to be starring in the production? Okay. All right, Niall, take us through what's going on here.
Yeah, so now we have end display on the wall, and I'm just going into Nuke, and up here you'll see our SDI reader node. So I'm just setting where we want to capture those SDI images, so you can see that in our viewport here, that's exactly what we're going to capture. Same thing that is going on the camera. We also have time codes coming into Nuke, because that's obviously vital for syncing those. And if we skip over to Unreal, we also have time code there, and that's going to get saved down into our sequence. So now we can basically do our take. So up here you'll see this is a way of syncing the record in Unreal. So as soon as I press record here, that's also going to set off the take recorder in Unreal. And we're good to go.
Yeah? All right.
Cool. See.
Sarah, what's my best side? None? No? I don't have a good side? Okay. Sarah, that's cruel. It's harsh. You good to go?
And 3, 2, 1, go for it.
Okay, Sarah.
And if we could get some camera movements, that would be great.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Get the tracking?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. I've got one more in me.
Just pivot it like left to right would be awesome. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Be good? Okay. You ready to say action?
1 second. And 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay.
Nice.
Now, in case you didn't get that, I was picturing a plane or coming over there. Yeah? Okay. So what happened there, Niall?
So,
Other than an Academy Award-winning performance.
of course. So yeah, now we have our take. So you can see this is our take 7 here. So we have our SDI captured images, so they're all captured on disk to EXOR, and we've also captured our our sequence within Unreal. So if I go to my sequencer here, we can see what I've just captured. I think we had those 2 takes. And there they are. And all the camera data and time code and everything we want is all stored within those takes. But also, when that take finished, we also wrote that render back out automatically to EXR. So if I create read nodes, and then we have our 2 read nodes. One is our render from Unreal, and one is our live input from the camera. So I'm going to try and do this with one hand. So, oh yeah, thanks. So if I replace this. Okay, so now we've got those 2 inputs now plugged into our node graph. And the first and most important thing now is we have to sync the time code. So if I go down here, we can calculate our time code offset. So that's just looking at the metadata, finding out what the time codes of each are, and basically syncing the 2. So if I click this, we can see there is a massive frame difference, which definitely isn't right. That looks like timecode did not come across from Unreal, which is an odd one. Yeah. So this is. Yeah, so I think we're not getting time code. I think we must have lost that at some point.
Oh, dear.
This is
This is the joy of doing it live.
This is the joy of doing it for live. Generally, we would have more than 5 minutes to do this.
Yeah.
Like to test takes. But I can still show you the workflow in any case.
Yes. So Niall, if you knock off that time offset, no, see the one to the left.
Yeah.
The one.
This guy, yeah.
That one. Yeah.
Mhm.
Disable that guy. That should put us somewhere in the ballpark. Anyway.
So I'm not sure it is because I think we do have timecode from Nuke, but not from Unreal. So I don't think we're going to be easily unless we put a massive offset on the other one.
I think we can carry on, and if you just check the overlay just to show the some pictures over.
So yeah, this is the overlay. So this is kind of like our first mix of the two images. So if we play, you can see our Unreal render isn't moving at the same time, so we're not synced, of course, with the issues of the time code. But you do get that. You should be able to see generally, okay, that movement should generally match. So that's our first look at making sure those two time codes are kind of roughly in the same ballpark. And once we have that kind of overlay, we can move down into using Copycat and those tools that Mairéad was talking about. So we have kind of different options here. So first of all, we're using ModNet, which is one of the inference tools. So because we didn't have time to train here and use that green screen approach that Mairéad talked about, we're going to use ModNet. So if I show this guy, there, so you can see that ModNet's actually doing a really nice job of getting a matte from Dan.
And Mairéad, this ModNet model, will this be appearing in the category?
It will be appearing in the category
Okay.
with Nuke 14, so keep an eye out. It's a very good model, very, very nice.
Oh, also, in case we were wondering why the category is called the category, we have because it's obvious to us, but it's Nuke, it's Copycat. It produces cat files. So where do you keep your cat files?
In the category.
Okay.
Nice. So yeah, then we have our lovely matte, and now we can actually start doing our comp. So we have the D-lens here, which Dan's already talked about, and then we can do our comp. Now we're programmers, so I'm sure comp artists would do a much better job than we've done. We're just doing some simple stuff here, a defocus, a grade, and and then we can actually take a look at the result. And or after a relens, then we can do a finish, maybe add some grain, and then we can try and take a look at the result.
Nice. So yes, look even more handsome than a second ago. Niall, you're a genius. So that's roughly the end-to-end workflow. As Niall said, with timecode, we were able to kind of lock everything in step. But you can see there that the metadata of the camera tracking, all of the lens information, has all been preserved. It's all been passed into the comp, and then this is your V1 of the comp, and you're good to go, and you can hand that off to visual effects to post and do what you like with it. So I'm really conscious of time. So because I think Eric, do we have time for a really quick Q&A, or like a couple of questions? Does anybody have any questions? Oh, we got 5 minutes. Great. Any questions from the audience? Yes.
I think it might be me.
How many takes do you think you need to do in rehearsal to get the machine learning ready? I know you mentioned 3. Is that realistic, or does it need to be more than that?
It depends. So I think one of the challenges is the quality of the image as well. So depending on you're using the camera raw files versus SDI, it depends on the type of camera as well. Some SDI feeds are cleaner than others. It depends on the type of the movement, the action, the shot. So like for the ones that we were doing here, like simple kind of movements, if there's like head and shoulders, you actually might be able to get away with 1 or 2. And it's not even full takes. If you just get the talent to keep the camera running, and you just get them to do it a few times. So yeah, and they can do it as quickly as they want. They can speed run it. The answer is it depends. But you can also review it. Once you have the training, you can review it, and if you see that it didn't quite get it, you can just get them in again, add in some frames, and then resume training. And in 5 minutes, then you'll have a better model. Yeah. Great question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Sarah Thomas Moffat. I am a director of photography.
Ah, nice.
So this is really cool. Thanks for sharing. My question is more about the copycat.
Yes.
When you're using the rehearsals and the green screen rehearsals, can you actually just use a stand-in actor, or do you need the actual actor? Because if you're trying to re-budget, you're going to have to pay for that actor to come in to do your copying.
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and I think it completely depends on how different they are going to, how different they are. So if you have someone coming in and they're very similar to your actor, then you're more likely to get a mat that will work. But if they look completely different, if they're different heights, if they've got different hair, if they've got long hair versus short hair, that copycat will only learn what it has seen. So if it hasn't seen someone with long hair and you're trying to get a final comp with someone with long hair, it might not work. So you're more likely to get a good comp if you have someone very similar. So that's why the actor is a good person to have. But if you have a good lookalike, they're also good.
In your experience so far, is anyone using the rehearsal in the actual, if it's a stand-in? Or have you only ever had the actor in for the rehearsal? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So for a couple of things that we did, we would train on, say, me, and then it would apply it to somebody else. So in some cases it works, some cases it doesn't. So as Mairéad said, it really comes down to the variability and how close in appearance. Exactly, yeah. And sometimes it'll work, and sometimes it just won't. Yes, exactly. Great question. I think we're going to wrap it up. I just want to close by saying a huge thank you to my colleagues and Peter for looping us into this amazing project. Huge thanks to Kevin, who's not here, who also looped us in. Huge thank you to Pier Paolo Verga and Eduardo De Angelis, the filmmakers, who have kindly allowed us to share this work. So to be clear, Comandante hasn't been filmed yet. So it's this is all pre-production tests that we've been looped into. So very kind of them to allow us to talk about it before the film's made. Huge thank you to Eric, the Voluminous team, Sam and Jose, Cassidy, Sarah, our director who was here.
Missy.
So huge thank you to everybody, and really appreciate being invited here to talk.
No problem. Thanks so much, Dan. This is great stuff. This is the kind of details that we live in off of. It's just amazing, And again, I'm a huge metadata guy, so I'm very much following a lot of the work that's out there. We're actually looking to produce a huge document on all the actual pieces of metadata coming through the pipeline. As a matter of fact, our team is actually going to be speaking next on some of the work we did for Fathead and some of that thing, and that's at 1 o'clock. So
Brilliant.
all right,
Excellent.
well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for your time.